We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! This is Uruzi, back again with a new series. This is what if Naruto was a simple teenage shop owner. Things aren't always as simple as they seem. Just because he found himself in a new world, Naruto shouldn't have forgotten this. Now he must deal with fallen angels, devils, perverts and God, all while maintaining a relationship and running his store. Things can never be simple for him. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 1. Rias Gremory prided herself on many things within her admittedly short life. She was born to the Gremory family, one of the last remaining pillars that made up Devil Society. The Gremory family was known for their kindness towards each other and their peerage. That brought up another thing she was proud of, her peerage. Ever since she had acquired her first piece, her queen, it had been slowly growing. She managed to gain a knight with a very powerful sacred gear, a rook who was a former Nekashu and a damper who had the power over time. Yes, she took a large amount of pride in her peerage members and her ability to connect with each of them. The relationships between herself and them were extremely close, with each of them pledging their loyalty to her at some point in their lives. It was because of this closeness that Rias felt that she knew each of her members' emotions rather well. Though recently, something or rather someone had been testing that closeness. Kaneko Toju was someone who rarely expressed her emotions. Due to her past and the trouble she had gone through in her life, she had become somewhat reclusive and rather callous towards others. It was only with her closest friends that the young girl dared to express even the tiniest amount of emotion. And when she did, it was usual in the form of a snarky remark spoken with a dull tone. But recently, that habit seemed to be getting even worse. The girl would spend shorter amounts of time in the club room where Rias's peerage would meet. When she would show up, she wouldn't even accept any treats offered by Akino, Rias's queen. She would just sit on the couch and stare off into space with an emotionless expression on her face. At first Rias had simply played it off as Kaneko simply being Kaneko, but that thought was slowly wiped from her mind after several weeks of this behavior. She had originally held off on sending her familiar to shadow the girl. She had felt that it may have been an invasion of Kaneko's privacy, but now, the resolve that had once fueled that decision was quickly fading. Rias released a sigh while running a hand through her scarlet hair. By her side stood at attention was her buxom dark-haired queen. The girl was sending worried glances down at her king as the redhead sat in the rays of the afternoon sun. This has been going on for several weeks, Rias-chan. She hasn't laid a finger on a single sweet I've tried to give her. This has been going on for far too long. I think it's time we get to the bottom of this. Akino spoke with clear amount of worry in her voice. Rias sighed to herself once again as she let her best friend's words sink in. She knew that Akino was right, but she was still against the idea of spying on one of her peerage members. It was breach of privacy that she was sure would anger her rook if she ever found out. But her growing concern for the girl was outweighing Rias's worry of angering her. You're right. Rias huffed before placing her hands on the table in front of her. Slowly a crimson, circular symbol appeared on the surface of the desk. The symbol began to glow an eerie red before a flash of light emitted from it, forcing Rias and Akino to look away. When they finally able to open their eyes, they turned and saw the creature Rias had summoned. The best way to describe the creature was as a miniature bat. Its face was very human-like as its small wings kept it afloat. Its eyes locked with Rias's before it suddenly took off towards the girl. The red-headed girl had a gentle smile on her face as the small bat perched itself on her shoulder and began to gently rub its head against her cheek. This creature was a familiar that she acquired during her first visit to the Summons Forest. The nocturnal animal had stayed by her side for years and would constantly find new ways to make itself handy. Like spying on Kaneko. Do you remember Kaneko? The small bat creature flew off its master's shoulder and gave a small nod. Good, I want you to follow her around. See what she is up to. Stay hidden from her and do not let her know you're following her. The creature gave a mock salute for dashing its way out of the open window, leaving Rias alone with Akino. I can't help but be anxious for the results. Rias merely nodded while her eyes continued to stare out the window. The sun was shining down from its position in the sky. The rays of sunlight illuminated the streets as citizens casually went about their days. Cars zoomed up and down the roads as shop owners happily greeted and spoke with their customers. It was on this particular summer day that we found Kaneko Toju making her way through the busy streets. Kaneko was a small, petite girl that looked to be around the age of 15. She had snow-white hair and hazel eyes. She was currently wearing a white long-sleeved button-down shirt with vertical linings, a black ribbon on the collar, a black shoulder cape and matching button-down corset with a magenta skirt that had white accents. Her small and cute form caught the attention of many pedestrians who sought to get her attention, but they were all ignored. Kaneko continued to make her way through the streets, making a turn every once in a while before eventually stopping in front of a shop. The store's display window was adorned with different pictures of various sweets and other treats. Kanji surrounded these pictures, boasting about their quality and authenticity. Above the windows sat a medium-sized sign that read Uzumaki Sweets. Kaneko pushed open the doors of the shop, making a small bell ring loudly through its interior. Several occupants threw glances towards her before returning their attention back towards their desserts. The girl ignored these looks as she strode her way up to the front of the store where a white counter was located. She stood still for several seconds before ringing the bell. It only took several seconds for her to get response. Someone gently shouted out, "I'm coming," from the back room of the shop before going silence. Kaneko continued to stand at the counter for several more seconds before the owner of the voice was revealed. The boy was young, at least when you considered the fact he was running the store all by himself. He looked to be around 17 years of age. He had golden blonde hair that went well with his tanned skin. He was rather tall, standing at a respectable 6 foot, and had a lean figure. His light blue eyes lit up when they met Kaneko's hazel ones. He was currently wearing a black apron that seemed to be covered in a mixture of sugar and flour. Underneath he wore a very simple orange button-down shirt and a pair of khakis. "Hey Ko-chan," the boy said as he approached the counter. For the first time since the beginning of her day, the hazel-eyed girl smiled as she leaned over the counter. The male bent over the counter as well, and their lips met in the center. The two stayed in this position for several seconds, fully enjoying the lip lock before eventually pulling away. Kaneko had a small blush on her face as she stared at the bashful blonde in front of her. This man was Naruto Uzumaki and her first ever boyfriend. At the thought of this, Kaneko blushed even more as the concept of having a boyfriend was still very new to her. The two had only begun dating 1 month, 3 weeks, 5 days, 8 hours, 44 minutes and 13 seconds. She had kept track. You see, the meeting between the unlikely couple had happened completely by chance. Akino and Rias had been particularly busy one day, leaving the young girl on her own to satisfy her need for sweets. She had traveled to her usual sweet shop only to find out that the owner had suddenly passed away. This had left the girl rather sad and without anything to munch on, forming a dejected aura around her as she trudged aimlessly around the city. She would have continued on until one of her fellow peerage member had found her if it hadn't been for the blonde standing in front of her. Naruto had been standing in front of his newly opened shop and was advertising it. When he saw the dejecting girl, he had immediately stopped her and offered a small sample of a simple vanilla cream wonton. The girl had immediately been mesmerized by the small treat before grabbing it at an inhuman speed and stuffing it in her mouth. She chewed it for several seconds before freezing. The young man had been initially scared that he had done something wrong as the girl remained unresponsive for several long seconds. His worry was quickly alleviated when the girl immediately dashed into his shop and sat at one of the chairs placed at the counter. She had a menu in her hand and was looking over it intensively, leaving Naruto to stand in shock in the middle of the street. When he finally managed to get behind the counter, the girl had already begun listing off several items that she wanted. Naruto could only chuckle at the enthusiasm behind his first real customer before beginning to work on her order. At first their relationship had been strictly as customer and cook, albeit slightly more relaxed. The blonde-haired man had a charismatic air to him that made even the usual stoic Kaneko break down and share a conversation with him. After several weeks, the boy had gradually broken down the barrier between the two and transcended their relationship into a more friendly one. The girl would come to the shop to simply talk about her day and exchange casual conversations with Naruto while also enjoying his delicious sweets. Naruto would be happy to oblige her with treats and a chat while also giving her large discounts. This pattern had continued for several more weeks before eventually the blonde-haired boy had asked the girl out. The request had taken the Nekasho by surprise and had honestly left her stunned. Naruto had apparently taken this as a no and immediately apologized to the girl. The depressed tone, the boy had snapped the cat-like girl from her shock-induced trance before she grabbed the boy, unconsciously forcing some of her devil strength into her arm, and pulled him closer to her. She hesitated once again before offering up a meek yes, and placing a small kiss on his cheek. From that point on, the relationship between the two had been growing exponentially. Kaneko could be consistently seen at the store, sharing a conversation with her boyfriend. The girl was content with sitting in his lap and having him feed her treats during some of the less busier moments of the day. His gentle hand combined with the natural warmth he exuded had immediately convinced the girl to make her boyfriend pet her. Naruto had no problem in indulging the cute girl and now could usually be seen stroking the girl's head or back. Their relationship had been going amazingly except for one small issue. That issue being the fact that she was a devil. The girl had always felt a certain amount of guilt whenever her partner shared a part of his day with her and she couldn't be completely truthful with him. Sometimes she was summoned in the middle of their conversations, forcing her to leave without any warning at all. When she would return, she would once again have to lie and embellish her activities. The blonde-haired boy would always accept the girl's excuses, which only caused her to feel an even larger amount of guilt. She knew if the relationship continued to an even higher level that she would be forced to reveal her nature, but for now she would allow the issue to rest. "How has your day off been, Ko-chan?" Naruto asked, snapping the girl out of her small thoughts. Her eyes met his before she offered a small shrug and jumped up on the counter. Naruto rolled his eyes at the girl's behavior while a small smile played across his lips. He placed his hands on either side of the girl's waist before dragging her over the counter and setting her on his lap as he sat down on a stool. The girl let out a small huff that immediately turned into a purr as Naruto's hand found their way to her scalp. The girl's purr was silenced when a stick of dango was placed in front of her lips. The white-haired girl opened her mouth and allowed her boyfriend to feed her the snack. Her voice turned into an appreciative moan as she enjoyed the combination of her boyfriend's baking and petting. If anyone from her school had seen her like this, they would be absolutely shocked at the amount of emotions the stoic girl was showing. "Hey Nico-chan?" Naruto asked, once again snapping the girl out of her train of thought. She briefly turned her head only to feel the blonde-haired boy's lips against her own. Her eyes widened in shock at the sudden contact before she relented to the kiss. The two held that position for several seconds before Naruto pulled back, leaving Kaneko with a heavy blush. The girl's eyes locked with his, surprise filling her at the amount of emotion present within his eyes. "I love you," Naruto stated, once again surprising the girl. This had been the first time either of them had ever gone as far to say the L word to each other. As a teenager, that would be surprising to most, but both had agreed they would rather not rush the relationship. Over the course of the relationship, their feelings for each other had been growing immensely, but neither had ever taken it this far. Though once she saw the emotions behind her boyfriend's eyes, a reaction was set off within herself. "I love you too, Naruto-kun," the girl stated, causing a large grin to sprout up on his face. The girl was brought into a massive hug as Naruto wrapped his arms around her. Kaneko rolled her eyes at the boy's reaction but still had a small smile on her face. In the end, she chose to just snuggle into the embrace and enjoy the special moment with her boyfriend. "Are you absolutely sure of what you saw?" Rias asked as her summon flew in front of her. The creature was once again in its bat form as it reported its findings to Rias. The bat gave a small nod, making Rias lean back in her seat with a heavy expression set upon on her usually beautiful face. "You are dismissed," the redhead stated, causing the summon to disappear in a small puff of smoke. Akino stood by her king's side with a shocked look adorning her beautiful face. The two sat like that for several moments before Akino finally spoke up. "If this is true, then that means..." Akino trailed off as the idea became so absurd that she couldn't even articulate it. Rias nodded, sharing the same amount of shock as her queen. "Yes. Our little Kaneko has a boyfriend." Naruto smiled to himself as he steadily ran a rag over the counter of his shop. The last customer had long since left, leaving the teen all to himself. A small light directly above his head was the only one on in the shop, highlighting the boy in a mysterious light. To others, Naruto Uzumaki was simply the only employee working at the small sweets shop. But in reality, the boy held so much more. He was Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, descendant of the Sage of Six Paths, reincarnation of Azura Otsutsuki and future Hokage. Well, the last title was true until he found himself in this new world. A last-ditch effort by Kaguya had sent him blasting through space and time using her powers. Just as he had managed to seal her, the woman had activated the technique. The experience had been painful as his very existence was tested by the laws of space and time. It felt as if his body had been torn apart and put back together over a whole century before he finally regained any sense of awareness. When he awoke, he found himself located in a desert that seemed to stretch on for miles. Exhausted, injured and dehydrated, he was forced to trudge his way through the miles of golden sand. It has taken him several days to reach any type of civilization. His first contact was with a small town that seemed to be centered around an oasis. The citizens had been rather put off at the sight of a basically naked, blonde-haired, bleeding man limping his way into the town. Luckily, some of the town members decided to show him a bit of mercy and patched him up. Unfortunately, they spoke a completely different language than his own, forcing him to eventually leave. From there, he spent the better part of several months exploring the world. The world he found himself in was entirely different from his own. The absence of chakra within humans was the first big shock. Chakra was basically non-existent in the world. Pure nature chakra was even harder to find as the pollution being spewed out by the humans clouded the world. The second big shock was the advancement in technology. Back in his world, trains and chakra armor were some of the most advanced technology he had laid his eyes on. In this world, a train was considered obsolete compared to the flying machines that sped across the sky faster than the speed of sound. Eventually, after much traveling, Naruto had decided to settle down in Japan. The people here spoke the same language as him and the culture was rather accepting of some ridiculous things. He figured he would be able to easily fit in despite his lack of knowledge. The first thing he had done was make his way to a library. After creating some clean clothes for himself using the henge technique, he had snuck his way into the bathroom of the library and created several clones. Naruto and his clone crew then spent the rest of the day going through the vast number of books, absorbing some basic information that would better help him blend into this society. The first obstacle he ran into was the fact that he did not exist. According to the government, he had no social security number, no passport, no license, absolutely nothing. His first task was to remediate it. This had taken a lot of infiltration, document manipulation and even a tiny bit of genjutsu usage. That last one had taken a very long amount of time due to his utter lack of any knowledge regarding the art. Though in the end, he managed to cast one that made it slightly easier to influence others to go along with his will. An amateur technique that any beginning genin could have learned in a matter of days, but to Naruto, it had taken weeks and proved to be a giant success. So according to the government, he was Naruto Uzumaki, orphaned since birth with no family ties whatsoever. He spent the first 16 years of his life in an orphanage in Tokyo before eventually finding himself a job. After scraping together enough money, the young man purchased a small property that, with a combination of henge clones, he managed to turn into a respectable shop that sold sweets of all kind. Of course, he had originally wanted it to be ramen-themed in remembrance of all the good times he had at Ichiraku's, but decided against it once he realized that no matter what he did, his ramen would always pale in comparison to the legendary noodles. Also, he had been surviving off of cheap sweets since his arrival in this world, so might as well start making his own. After making sure the shop was completely finished, he began to advertise. Due to his rather small budget, he was forced to stand in front of the store and hand out flyers. He had a clone in the back, making a small amount of treats that he would give out as samples. Meanwhile, he would stand outside, a plate full of treats in one hand and a handful of flyers in the other. It had all started off rather slow, but once a brave couple had stepped forward and tried a stick of dango, it all picked up. Steadily, a stream of customers slowly began to enter the shop. His clone began to serve the people outside while he attended to the others outside. By the end of the day, he had managed to make over 60,000 yen in profit. That night, he managed to sleep very well in the back room of his shop. Over the next several weeks, his shop had experienced a wide range of success. It had become a local hit around the neighborhood and Naruto managed to even acquire some people he would even call regulars. Everything was going quite well for the blonde-haired boy. Things changed on the day he met Kaneko. He had once again been advertising his store when he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time, a large source of chakra. His eyes had immediately locked on to the white-haired girl that had been dejectedly walking down the street towards him. Her emotions were visible to everyone as she trotted down the street. Though, unlike everyone else, Naruto could detect a small output of chakra coming from her. The girl immediately caught his interest and he knew he had to know more about her. So he decided to offer her a sample. He did not expect for the girl to suddenly rush into his shop and set up camp in a seat. He also didn't expect the girl to keep coming back. Day after day, the young white-haired girl would continue to come back to his shop for me. At first, Naruto had just attempted to pry information from the girl. Their conversations were very sparse and short. Slowly that began to change. Naruto began to grow curious about more than just her chakra. He started to ask questions about her day, her mood, her feelings. At first, he was met the stoic attitude that she showed everyone. Not one to be put off by such behavior, Naruto continued to poke and prod at her cold exterior. Slowly, ever so slowly, he managed to worm his way past the girl's exterior and find a place in her heart. Her cold answers became sarcastic quips and her blank stares began to show the smallest amounts of interest. As the weeks went by, the girl began to open up more and more to him as he did the same. Finding out how she had chakra was far from Naruto's mind by the time he could truly consider the girl a close friend. The feeling of friendship soon developed into something more as they became more and more open with each other. Too often he would find himself getting lost in her hazel eyes. He noticed that his stares would last a bit longer whenever he got the chance to look at her rear or budding breasts. Panic had quickly began to rise in him when he noticed his feelings for her. That panic was soon relieved, however, when he began to see some changes in Kaneko. She began to demand that she sit him on his lap while eating her treats. Her excuse was that he gave off a certain warmth that she found very comforting due to the harsh winter they were going through at that point of the year. He could feel her gaze locked on his back whenever he was preparing desserts for other customers. She would become defensive whenever any female customers showed the slightest signs of attraction towards him. Due to dealing with his own feelings and emotions, he was able to figure out that Kaneko was attracted to him. It was surprising at first to think that her feelings for him stretched any further past friendship, but he soon came to realize that Kaneko's behavior towards him went past the realm of just friends. In the end, Naruto had decided to act on these feelings and ask the girl out, and to his pleasant surprise, she had accepted. Ever since then, the two had been happily together. The relationship between them hadn't changed much except they were much more open about their feelings for each other. Kaneko no longer needed an excuse to sit on his lap while hugging and small kisses had become the normal greeting between the two. It was honestly some of the best time the blonde-haired boy had had in his rather short life. Naruto's train of thought was abruptly cut off when he heard the door to his shop open suddenly. He looked up and was immediately frozen in place by what he saw. Standing near the entrance were two beautiful young women. Both were dressed similarly, wearing an outfit that seemed similar to what a schoolgirl would wear. The one in front had crimson hair that fell down the length of her back. Her eyes were narrowed as her gaze locked onto his form. The woman behind her was what some would describe to be the ideal Japanese woman. Her long black hair, angular face, and slender form would have attracted the gaze of any hot-blooded male. Fortunately for her, Naruto was a faithful man and kept his eyes firmly locked at eye level. "I'm sorry ladies, but we are closed for the night. You're free to come back tomorrow when we're open." The redhead's eyes narrowed even further at the boy's innocent behavior. She began to slowly make her way towards the counter while her black-haired companion followed close behind. Naruto remained completely still, a small smile still on his face as the irate girl marched her way towards him. "What is your relationship with Kaneko Toju?" the girl asked while slamming her hands down on the counter. Naruto caught a brief spike of energy coming from the girl before Akino placed her hand on Rias' shoulder. The energy immediately died down, but it still lasted long enough to catch Naruto's interest. Whatever that energy was, it felt powerful yet felt nothing like chakra. "Oh, you gals know Ko-chan. She hasn't mentioned anything about you guys, I think." Naruto had to hold in a snicker as he literally saw the girl grow angrier in front of him. Kaneko had actually spoke about her upper classmate who would look out for her and take care of her during school. He could only assume that this girl was the same one she spoke about. "Answer my question." Rias managed to spit out in between clenched teeth. Naruto's smile grew a bit larger as he turned his back to the two girls and began to clean his cooking station. Immediately, Rias's anger spiked again and she had to be physically restrained by Akino from attacking the boy. "Nico-chan is my girlfriend. We've been happily together for a couple of months at this point, Naruto calmly said while cleaning several of his utensils. He was greeted with silence for several seconds, causing him to turn around to see how the girls were reacting. He was caught by surprise when a hand full of glowing energy was thrust into his face. I'm sorry, but I can't allow this to continue. This relationship will only end in pain for the both of you, and as a king, it's my job to protect my peerage. Both Naruto and Akino were caught off guard by the tone the girl was using. Rias, don't you think this is too far? Shouldn't this be Kaniko's decision? Akino was immediately silenced when Rias held her hand up to her. The black-haired girl lowered her head and stepped back. She knew that her king had made her decision and she could not change that. The girl was just that stubborn. Rias leveled her eyes to the surprisingly calm Naruto. The boy's eyes were locked onto her glowing hand as he continued to stand still. Your memories of Kaniko and this visit will be erased. You may be angry at me now, but things are far more complicated than they seem. I am only saving you the trouble, Rias stated while the purple glow of her hand grew brighter. Naruto could only grow more curious as he felt a force settle over him. If he had to compare it to something, it would be as if someone was attempting to cast a genjutsu on him. This only made him more curious as the two girls in front of him seemed to be able to wield this energy for offensive purposes. Plus the girl's mini-speech tipped him off that things weren't as simple as they looked. He would have a lot of questions for Kaniko when he saw her again. Goodbye, mortal, Rias said before placing her palm on Naruto's face. The glowing light in her palm latched onto Naruto's head, causing the boy to flinch. Rias stepped back as a bright purple light surrounded the blonde-haired boy's head. The light began to grow brighter and brighter before suddenly dissipating, catching both Rias and Akino by surprise. That was a rather interesting technique you have there. I would give it a C rank if it was a genjutsu. Though, you're sort of out of luck. I'm used to dealing with annoying people and their illusions, Naruto stated as the last remnants of the purple light fell at his feet. While the girl's powers were impressive, they didn't stand a chance to a quick burst of his chakra. Who are you? What are you? Rias managed to spit out despite her shock. She didn't sense any demonic, angelic or magic energy from the boy. There was no way he should have been able to break through her hypnosis technique. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I'm just a guy who works at a dessert shop. The better question is who are you? Chapter 2. Kaniko was furious. Angry or slighted didn't exactly do the trick when it came to expressing her current mood. She had never felt more agitated in her whole life. And all this anger was currently directed at her king, Rias Gremory. You did what? Kaniko growled out while staring at her king. The volume at which she spoke was rather uncharacteristic of her, especially since she was talking to the red-headed girl who was sitting calmly behind her desk, a fact that only served to piss Kaniko off even more. Akino was standing behind her queen, seemingly stuck on whether to find the scene to be amusing or actually be concerned about how angry her younger peer seemed to be at her friend. I visited your boyfriend. At the word boyfriend, Rias raised her hands and formed air quotes, an act that made Kaniko bristle with anger. You weren't acting like yourself, so I decided to get to the bottom of it. I had my familiar follow you and discovered that you were hiding this from us. What I want to know is why didn't you tell us? Kaniko began to scowl at the girl's question before quickly taking in a deep, calming breath. Even though she was angry at her king for invading her privacy, Rias was still her king and friend. I didn't tell either of you because I didn't find it necessary. My relationship with Naruto is between him and myself. I didn't find the need to inform any of you because it wouldn't affect my duties as a devil or as a student. Kaniko attempted to say in her usual stoic voice, though it was obvious that a bit of anger had slipped into her speech. But it has been affecting your relationship with us. You could have told us, Kaniko-chan. Akino finally spoke up. The young Nekasha's eyes cut towards the fallen angel turned devil. The sharpness of the look caused Akino to immediately shut her mouth. Kaniko huffed at the action before crossing her arms across her chest and looking directly at the two. I apologize if I have been acting differently as of recently, but that does not mean that I think it was right for you two to invade my privacy. You should have asked before taking such drastic measures like following me, Kaniko stated with a sense of finality in her voice. Rias's eyes met the young cat girl's eyes and the two began to have a heated stare-off. Akino watched from the sidelines as the two headstrong girls' wills crashed against each other. Few people were stubborn enough to actually keep up with Rias's stubborn streak, and Akino knew that Kaneko was one of those people. When the white-haired girl wanted something, she would dig it and not relent until she got that something. In Rias's mind, she was having a mini monologue. She was surprised that the girl was showing this much resistance to the situation. When she had originally learned about Naruto, she had just figured that Kaneko had fallen to a trend that many girls her age went through. Getting a boyfriend and being a couple was something that was expected of girls her age. The two had apparently been going out for almost 2 months, so there still was a possibility that it could be just a phase. But the look in the girl's eyes told Rias that Kaneko did not believe so. This was the most passion she had ever seen the girl show since the two had met each other. It had almost made her flinch, since she had never seen this type of fire in the girl's eyes. But even with that much passion, Rias was still very uncertain about the situation. To her, Kaneko was still the little girl that had been looking for any sense of comfort after her sister had left her all alone. As her king and her first friend, it was her job to make sure the girl would not get hurt. Whether that was physically or emotionally did not matter to the Gremory. Well, I still do not approve. He is over 2 years older than you and is a human. He looks to be a ruffian, and his attitude was way too pleasant when we spoke. Plus, he doesn't even attend a school. He's bound to turn out to be a delinquent if he already isn't one. Rias stated while closing her eyes, the issue being over in her mind. The temperature in the room almost seemed to drop as Kaneko's anger once again spiked to its highest levels. The girl was shaking in place, her hands clenched into tight fists as he attempted to hold in her anger. Her hands were so tightly squeezed that blood was beginning to leak from underneath her fingernails. I do not care if you approve of my relationship. I know that Naruto is a good person, and I will continue my relationship with him for however long I want. The girl said rather sharply before storming out of the club room, slamming the door on her way out. I think you may have gone a bit far, Rias. That was the angriest I have ever seen Kaneko-chan. Akino said while watching the girl stomp her way off the campus through the window located in the club room. Rias released a large sigh before slumping down in her chair and closing her eyes. Even with her queen saying otherwise, she had to believe she made the right decision. For her conscience's sake. Naruto was not really all that surprised when his girlfriend came charging into his store near noon the day after her friends had come into his store. The girl was obviously agitated, as she didn't even offer him a verbal greeting. She just immediately jumped into his lap, grabbed his hand and placed it on her head. Reading her mood and knowing how his girlfriend acted, Naruto immediately began to massage her scalp. Very slowly, the tension in her shoulders began to fade away and she began to melt more into his embrace. It was a very comical sight to the people present in the shop as the older boy bent to the whim of the younger girl. The young couple's behavior was seen as adorable by the older customers in the shop. I'm guessing you found out about Rias and Akino visiting me? Naruto said after several minutes of silent petting. Kaneko froze for several seconds before offering him a small nod. Naruto let out a gentle hum while increasing the intensity of his petting. The girl began to fall deeper and deeper into the embrace, feeling a sense of warmth and comfort coming from the boy that she hadn't felt for years. Don't be too mad at them. They were only trying to be good friends and look out for you. Plus, you know it doesn't bother me. It's nice to finally see the people you hang out with when you're not around me. At this point Kaneko had her eyes closed and seemed to be just barely listening to the conversation. A cute pout appeared on her face before she pressed herself even harder against Naruto's chest. I don't want them around you, the girl said rather sleepily. It seemed the warmth coming from Naruto's body was putting her to sleep. He found it rather amusing and very cute that the girl was actually falling asleep after diving into his lap. Why not? At this, the girl flipped over so she was straddling the boy's waist. She dug her head deep into her chest while wrapping her arms around his body. Giant. Ape. Makes me jealous, she mumbled before quickly succumbing to her urge to sleep. Naruto looked down at the girl for several seconds before shaking his head and picking her up. The girl's worrying was cute, but it was very unnecessary. What she didn't know was that in his home, he was surrounded by some of the biggest-breasted women he had ever seen in his life. Tsunade Senju, Hinata Hyuga, Mei Terumi, Ino Yamanaka, the list could go on. Even though he was a teenage boy, he had grown used to being around busty women. He would not neglect the girl because of her chest size. After all, how could anyone ignore the cutest devil in all of existence? Sir's Lucifer could be considered the most powerful devil in existence at the moment. The man was the leader of the four great Satan. His talents included immense demonic power, mastery in hand-to-hand combat, the power of destruction at his beck and call, and the strongest queen in the underworld. Though, the pride he felt in all of these things were nothing compared to the pride he felt at being the big brother of Rias. Sir's had a very large sister complex. While it was nothing perverted, it was very noticeable to everyone around the man. Whenever he would see his younger sibling, he would immediately try to embrace her in a hug. Whatever she asked of him, he would get it done immediately. There was almost nothing he wouldn't do for the girl just because she was his precious little sister. This was a fact that was known throughout the underworld. It was also a fact that was known by Rias. Emuto? Is that really you? I'm so glad you have finally called your Nii-san. The strongest devil could be heard gushing over the handheld phone in his office. Standing by his side was one of the most beautiful and deadliest women alive. She had long silver hair and matching silver, wore a blue and white maid outfit with a matching headpiece. And currently, she was staring at her husband with a neutral look on her face. On the other end of the phone call, Rias had to hold in a sigh at the excitement her brother was showing. Don't get her wrong, she loved her brother and was happy that the man loved her, but sometimes his behavior could get annoying. Though it was still endearing, just in a very annoying way. Yes, it's really me, Oni-sama. I called because I need a favor and I have no one else to turn to. Rias knew she shouldn't be playing on her brother's emotions like that, but she felt that it was necessary. The desperate statement was completely unnecessary, but she knew it would immediately catch her brother's attention. Sir's could almost feel his heart tearing at the fact that his Emuto seemed to be in a hard situation. He still carried a large amount of guilt for setting up the marriage between the girl and Riser Phoenix and causing her so much grief in the first place. It was part of the reason why he attempted to do absolutely everything the girl requested of him. Whatever you need, your big brother will do it for you. At this, Rias smiled and Grafia let out a loud sigh. Sometimes it was just too easy to manipulate the strongest man in the underworld. Thank you, and please come again, Naruto said with a polite smile on his face as he handed the bag of treats over to the young man in front of him. The boy, who looked to be his age or a year younger, had come charging into the school screaming about how he needed sweets for his new girlfriend. He had practically begged Naruto for recommendations because he did not know what to get for the girl. Naruto was happy to oblige the young man by picking out certain things that would be seen romantic. It was hard for him not to feel sympathy towards the boy since he, himself, was currently in a new relationship. No, thank you. You have no idea how much this will help me. Hopefully, Yuma-chan will like this enough that she'll invite me to her house and I can see her boobs, the boy said with a rather perverted tone to his voice. Naruto let out an uncomfortable chuckle as the boy began to make groping motions with his hands in the air. He watched as the boy unconsciously grabbed the bag and walked out of the store while muttering perverse things to himself. Such a strange boy. Reminds me of Jiraiya, but apparently, he actually managed to get a girlfriend. But if he managed to find a girl that can deal with his perverted nature, good for him, Naruto said to himself while dusting his hands off. The blonde boy was about to make his way to the back room, but something made him stop in his motions. The most powerful energy he had felt since he had arrived in this world had just entered the shop. Naruto looked up and saw a man standing at the entrance of his shop. The red-headed man was dressed in a rather tight suit that was decorated with spiraling, red designs. He wore a white dress shirt underneath with suit along with a red tie. He had on a pair of black sunglasses that hid the fact he was scanning the interior of the shop. This is the most energy I've felt coming from someone since I've arrived here. It could rival some of the Kages. And he looks like a male version of that Rias girl. Now, I know that something interesting is definitely going on, Naruto asked while casually eyeing the man. The man stood at the entrance of store for several seconds before quickly striding his way towards the counter. Naruto pretended not to notice the man as he began to prepare several dango sticks. The man got to the counter and rang the bell. Naruto quickly turned to the man and flashed him a polite smile. Hello, sir. What can I do for you today? Naruto asked in his generic customer service voice. The shinobi was aware that snacks were probably the last thing that this man was looking for. Yes, I would like to talk to the owner of this establishment. I have some very important issues I would like to discuss with him or her. the man stated while pushing the glasses back up the bridge of his nose. Naruto's smile grew even larger before he quickly stripped out of his apron and grabbed a clip-on tie to put on. I am the owner of this shop. Naruto Uzumaki at your service. Naruto said while offering his hand out to the man. The businesslike man stared at the hand before raising his own and engaging in a handshake with the boy. He was caught off guard when he was almost forced to his knees by the strength behind the teenage boy's grip. This was one of the tightest handshakes he had ever had in his life. Ah, well, I am Sirzex Lucifer and I'm here because I am interested in buying this shop of yours. When Rias had first laid out her plans to him, Sirzex had been really confused. The girl had wanted him to pose as a businessman and buy the shop from the blonde-haired boy in front of him, who he learned was Kaniko's boyfriend. His little sister's logic was that Kaniko was just using the boy because he was offering her an unlimited amount of sweets. Once that supply of treats was taken away from her, Kaniko would realize that their relationship wasn't real and break up with the boy. If any other person had asked him to do something as ridiculous as this, he would have laughed in their face and told them how idiotic they were being. Unfortunately for him, Rias was his precious Imuto and he could never deny her request. I'm sorry, but you seem to have wasted your visit. I have no intentions on selling this shop anytime soon. I am very well off with it. And Naruto was not lying when he said this. The amount of money that he was pulling in from the sales of the shop had left him with a very sizable amount of spending money. He no longer slept in the back room of the store, even though he kept a mattress back there for whenever Kaniko fell asleep. He now had a small apartment located only a block away from the shop. His bank account had slowly been growing ever since his first month of business. Well, I've traveled a very long distance, so I'm not going to leave before I even put an offer down on the table. Sirzex said before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a check. He carefully slid the slip of paper over the desk and stepped back to watch the boy's reaction. Naruto reached down and picked up the paper. He let out an appreciative hum at the large amount of zeros present on the tiny slip of paper. It almost looked as if he was about to say yes to the deal, right before he casually ripped up the little piece of paper. I'm sorry, but I still have to refuse. This shop isn't just the next paycheck to me. It holds a lot of sentimental value to me even though it hasn't been in existence for too long. I can't just give it up now. Naruto said while crossing his arms across his chest. Sirzex stared down at the ripped-up pieces of paper with an unreadable expression on his face. But internally, the red-headed man was freaking out. The check was supposed to be the killing blow to the boy. What teenage boy wouldn't want to be instantly rich? Apparently, this blonde-haired idiot didn't want to be, and if that was true, then he couldn't fulfill his promise to her. If he didn't fulfill his promise, it would mean that he disappointed his sister. Sirzex Lucifer did not like upsetting Rias. Wait. Sirzex spoke before letting a little bit of his power settle over Naruto as an attempt to influence him. The boy stiffened, making Sirzex believe that his power had worked. While he didn't like using his powers on humans, the one thing he couldn't afford to do was disappoint Rias. But he knew he would feel terrible if he just took everything away from the boy without giving him at least a fighting chance. How about we play for it? A simple game of poker. You win, you get the money and I walk out of the shop forever. You lose, I get the shop and I give you half the amount. Sirzex said. Naruto remained frozen for several seconds before slowly nodding his head. Sirzex grinned before reaching into his pocket and summoning a deck of cards. He walked back up to the counter before dealing the cards at a rapid pace. Naruto's eyes were locked on the steadily growing set of cards located on his half the counter. Sirzex glanced up from his shuffling to examine Naruto's eyes. The boy's eyes were slightly glazed over, causing the red-haired man to sigh. He had cast a sense-dulling spell on the poor. His senses were lowered along with his sense of judgment. He was basically seeing everything as if he was drunk. Let's get this game started. Sirzex said before flipping over the first card. The man was so confident in his own ability that he didn't even notice the small grin placed upon Naruto's lips. I am so sorry, Rias-chan. I tried my best, but he tricked me. He tricked me. Rias attempted to hold in a sigh as her older brother sobbed into her leg. Her brother had teleported in the club room only minutes ago and had immediately started to cry. At first, he was too hysterical to even talk, but eventually, Rias managed to coax some information out of him. Apparently, Surzex had attempted to win the ownership of the shop via poker match. He had even cast a spell on Naruto in order to make sure the odds were in his favor. By the middle of the game, he realized just how wrong he had been. The boy had left him utterly defeated and a lot less rich. The man had immediately demanded a rematch, but Naruto had refused. In the end, Surzex was forced to leave the shop completely empty-handed. "It's fine, Onie-sama. Just go home. I'm not mad at you," Rias said in a restrained voice while petting the head of her older brother. Even though he had failed in his mission, Rias couldn't be too mad. It was partly her fault for not including the fact that Naruto seemed to be immune to devil powers. Though, she expected for that immunity to crumble at her brother's hands. The man looked up at her, his face covered in tears and snot while his bottom lip quivered. Rias forced a smile, causing her brother to smile as well. He gave her a small smile before disappearing from the clubhouse. "What will you do now, Rias?" Akino spoke as she watched the unmoving form of her king. The red-headed girl let out a sigh before turning towards the door. "For now, we leave them alone. We have more important things to attend to tonight," the girl stated while looking at the setting sun in the distance. Tonight was the night where she would gain another member of her peerage. Naruto was whistling idly to himself as he made his way from the bank to his house. After tricking Surzex and taking a large amount of his money from him, Naruto had kicked the man out and went about the rest of his day. At the end of it, he closed up his shop and made his way to the bank with his rather sizable check. He had been waiting all day to deposit the cash and had decided that he would do it personally. Luckily, he had managed to make it to the bank just before it closed and deposited the large sum of money. The teller had almost had a heart attack at the amount being put in. She personally called the owner of the check, Mr. Lucifer as he liked to be called, to see if the check was actually stolen. The man had reluctantly admitted that the check was real and gave the woman the authority to process it. Naruto could hear the frustration in the man's voice through the short phone conversation, and it only served to make the occasion even better to him. Naruto's whistling slowly decreased in volume as he thought of items to add to the menu of his shop. He had recently been experimenting with making daifuku, which was a rice cake with a sweet filling. The rice cake portion was rather easy, but Naruto was attempting to add a twist to the traditional filling. He had clones working around the clock in order to discover the greatest combination of rice cake and sweets. Naruto's attention was taken away from his sweets when he noticed a very brief flicker of light appear in front of him before immediately disappearing. His eyes widened slightly when he saw a literal barrier sprout out from the ground and erect itself over a rather large piece of land. The energy coming from the barrier seemed rather familiar to the blonde. To the normal human eye, the barrier was most likely invisible, but to Naruto's trained eye, it was just sitting here in plain sight. "Well, might as well step in." The boy placed his hands on the barrier and began to focus his chakra into it. The portion in front of him began to waver as Naruto's chakra invaded it. After several seconds, a small portion of the barrier shattered like glass, allowing Naruto free entry into the barricaded area. He stepped into confines of the red barrier, noticing that it seemed to only stretch around the park. He began to walk deeper and deeper into the park, attempting to find the origin of the barrier. After only a half a minute of walking, Naruto stumbled upon a very interesting sight. Laying in the center of a rather large field was a dead boy. This was the very same boy that had visited his shop only a couple of hours ago, asking for treats in a rather perverted fashion. The boy had to be dead as there was a gaping hole in his stomach and the grass surrounding his corpse took on a crimson color. But that wasn't the most surprising part. What was most shocking was the fact that Rias, the same girl that had walked into his shop and interrogated him, was standing over the dead boy with several chess pieces in her hand and a bright red light surrounding her form. He saw the girl place the chess pieces on the boy's chest before stepping back and shouting a few words. The chess pieces on the boy's chest began to glow the same shade red before slowly sinking into his chest. Naruto's curiosity continued to grow as the boy's stomach magically began to knit itself back together as if it wasn't just torn apart a couple of seconds ago. His cheeks became flushed and his chest began to rise and fall, signify that the boy was once again breathing. A technique capable of bringing back the dead. I haven't seen anything like that since the Edo Tensei. I wonder what part the chess pieces play in it. Are they just a catalyst that holds what's necessary for the revival and her energy sets off the chain reaction, or are they just for show? Do the pieces contain some sort of sealing array? Also, what is this energy I keep feeling that is coming from this girl? I need to find out more about this resurrection technique. If she is able to control him just like Kabuto was able to, then I have a very bad situation on my hands. I don't want to fight another army of undead super-powered assholes. But I don't think this will be the best time. My arrival here would be very suspicious and could cause the girl to act irrationally. Best if I just send a shadow clone to tag her for the next couple of days. I have a feeling this will turn out to be troublesome in the end. Naruto's mind was racing as he watched the girl effortlessly pick up the boy and place him over her shoulder in a fireman-style carry. A red seal began to glow under her feet before she disappeared in a bright flash of red. Life is about to get a lot more interesting. I can feel it. Naruto thought to himself before fading away in a swirl of wind and leaves. The only evidence of the events that happened the night before was the circular patch of blood-stained grass in the center of the park. Chapter 3. Deep in the untouched forests of Japan, a small clearing sat surrounded by the miles of dense forestry. Sitting in the center of the clearing was Naruto Uzumaki. The young man had his legs crossed with his hands folded on his lap. His eyes were closed and his body was completely still as he seemingly meditated. If one had the ability to see the energies of the world, they would see a very interesting sight taking place. The trees, the grass, the bushes, every single piece of the earth was filled to the brim with energy. This energy was not the type you would find in fallen angels, demons, devils, angels, or mythical gods. This energy was unique, forged from thousands of years of planetary movement. This energy was called natural energy. Ever since he had arrived in this world, Naruto had been rather interested in the natural energy it held. Unknown to most, each of the planets had their own type of natural energy. The energy was created from thousands of years of interaction between the planet, its inhabitants, and space. The energy was almost sentient in nature. It learned, adapted, and took in everything around it. It could be healed and purified, or it could be tainted with hatred and sadness. And the latter was exactly what had occurred with this planet. Naruto had done some research on the history of the planet and its interaction with humans. What he found definitely explained why the natural energy pouring from the planet was so hate-filled. In the earlier days of history, wars left the earth soaked with the blood of humans. As war advanced, the weapons that came along with it advanced, and these weapons left even more of a mark on the planet. Nuclear weapons filled the earth and the sky with chemicals that only served to increase the damage that was being done. More and more blood was shed and the earth unwillingly soaked it all in. That was just war. Other industries around the world had done just as much damage. Oil drilling and excavation left giant holes in the planet. Harmful chemicals were consistently pushed into the atmosphere by cigarettes while factories ripped holes in the ozone layer. Artificial dams and human structures made rivers run dry and took away habitats from aquatic animals. In the end, the earth felt all of this. Rather, if it had a consciousness or not, it felt it all and it absorbed it all. It grew angry at the ones who were causing it so much harm. Its once peaceful and healing energy turned tainted with hatred due to the treatment that it had suffered under the rule of mankind. Now for most people, this wouldn't be a problem. The only real noticeable effect for most was an increase in erratic weather patterns and natural disasters. But the people who felt the biggest effect from the tainted energy were senjutsu users. The act of creating senjutsu involved drawing in an abundance of natural chakra and mixing it with the user's own life energy. The art of senjutsu required large chakra reserves and, more importantly, strong mental fortitude. For when you take in the natural energy, you also take in the emotions behind it. In Earth's case, you take in hundreds, even thousands of years of taint. The mental backlash of taking in that amount of emotions could literally drive a person insane or leave them brain dead. The physical backlash could cause a heart attack or instant death. That's why it was impossible to take in natural energy without being in a meditative state. One needed to be at peace with themselves and at their strongest to be able to conquer the effects of natural chakra. When Naruto had first entered Sage Mode on this planet, he had been taken back by the amount of hate he could feel flowing through the earth. While in Sage Mode, his range of sense was spread over miles of land. And every single inch of it was flowing with this intense, tainted, hate-filled energy. And that energy was now currently flowing through every single drop of his chakra. It had taken a lot of his own mental fortitude to overcome the intense hatred, but in the end he won over it and purged it. When the purged chakra had exited Naruto's body and entered nature once again, it had spread through the area he had been meditating in. The grass seemed to shine a brighter shade of green, the sunlight seemed to gleam brighter and the trees seemed livelier. It had actually put a smile on Naruto's face when he saw just how much the clearing had changed from the insertion of the natural energy. Ever since then, Naruto had dedicated his Sunday mornings to purging small pockets of natural energy around the areas of Japan. From the top of skyscrapers to the middle of forests, Naruto always made sure to at least spend 2 hours purging as much of the planet's energy as he could. To be honest, the amount he managed to purge wasn't even a drop in the bucket when it came to the amount of tainted natural energy that was all around the world. But as a sage, he had to at least try to make a difference. For the first time in the past hour, Naruto's chest moved as he inhaled a long breath. The morning sun was shining down on his form, illuminating his golden hair and giving him an almost ethereal appearance. The boy's chest slowly fell as he exhaled, unconsciously pumping another wave of the purified chakra back into the earth. Deep inside his own inner consciousness, Naruto's eyes fluttered open. He immediately took in the abundance of nature around him. Enormous trees formed the outline of a massive clearing. In the distance, an active volcano could be seen erupting. A plume of black smoke was rising from the active mouth of the natural disaster. Above the stack of smoke, high up in the sky, were 8 planetoid objects. They weren't big enough to be considered planets, but they definitely weren't meteors or anything like that. Each of the planets had a set amount of moons rotating slowly around it, stretching from 1 moon all the way up to 8 moons. How cliché of them! Naruto thought to himself as he stood to his full height. He allowed himself to stretch for several seconds even though it wasn't entirely necessary considering he was currently in his own mindscape. When he had first arrived in the new world, Naruto had been almost completely alone. Lost with no idea where to go, most would have broken down and quit right then and there. Fortunately for the blonde-haired shinobi, he had the tailed beast sealed within him. The 9 beast helped counsel him and guide him in his time of need. Their experience, inside and outside their containers, had given the boy and the beasts plenty to talk about and occupy his mind with. Their relationship had grown so much that Naruto allowed each of the beasts to reign over a domain in his mindscape. Each of the domains were represented by the planetoid-esque objects in the sky. The number of moons rotating around the planetoids represented which tailed beast were located on it. It's not cliché. It's just an expression of their egos. A voice boomed out from behind the tree line. Naruto turned his body and looked on as a section of trees along the tree line began to shake. Slowly, a massive red paw came into view. Following the paw was a leg covered in red fur. The leg was connected to a slightly humanoid body. Attached to the body was the head of a fox, adorned with massive rabbit ears. The eyes held the pattern of the Rinnegan as the fox-like creature stared down at its container with a smirk on its face. Whole planets, though? Is that really necessary? Naruto asked the giant fox. The beast let out a soft hum before slowly sitting down, leaning his head on his front haunches. My brothers and sister are thousands of years old and spent the majority of the past couple of centuries sealed away. And in most cases, where their sealing took place was not exactly the most pleasant of places. They only wish to have a place where they can stretch their legs and roam free. Kurama stated while looking down at his container. Naruto could only nod at the explanation as he was sure he would feel the same way if their positions were switched. He went to took a seat on the forest ground but just before his butt could hit the ground, a chair rose from the ground to catch him and propel him upwards until he was eye level with the fox. When you put it like, I can understand. Anyways, what have you found out about the energy and resurrection technique the girl used? Naruto asked. After seeing the red-haired girl bring back the boy from the dead, he had immediately wanted to capture and interrogate the girl for information about the technique. Any ability that had the power to resurrect those from the dead, seemingly more powerful and rejuvenated than before, needed to not be in the wrong hands. Of course he realized there was more to the girl than it seemed. He just needed to figure out what that was without tipping her off. That was why he had given Kurama full permission to delve into his memories of that night to analyze the chakra and technique in order to find out anything that could help to shed some light on the inner workings of the skill. The energy, if I had to compare it to something, is somewhat similar to the chakra created by the zero-tailed beast. It's dark, not corrupted but dark. The chess pieces seem to be a catalyst for it all. The energy produced by the girl set off the reaction within the chess pieces. When I took a closer look, the pieces seemed to serve 3 purposes. The first one was to revive the boy. I hypothesize that the pieces contain some sort of very powerful healing technique that helps revive the dead and bring their body to perfect condition. The second purpose is to fill the body with this dark chakra, basically converting the newly revived human to whatever the girl is. Trust me, she is not human. No normal human in this realm contains that much dark energy. Anyways, I'm getting off track. The third purpose the piece serves is the most worrying to me, honestly. You see, the energy that fills the revived body carries similarities to the energy the girl sent through the pieces. The energy is integrated through every single fiber of that boy. The third step basically bounds the boy to the girl. I don't know how, but I can sense a connection between the two, and it definitely wasn't there before he was revived. Kurama finished as his tails swung lazily behind him. Naruto had his head propped up against his hand as he went over the new information. It honestly did not help to alleviate any of the worries he felt. This teenage girl had the ability to revive the dead and bound them to herself while making them even stronger than before. The strange energy that she possessed that had the ability to revive and strengthen the deceased was also just as worrying. There's also another thing you should know. I took the liberty of looking a bit deeper into your memory, and along with chakra, I could sense the exact same dark energy coming from your little girlfriend. There's a possibility that she may have gone through the same process as that boy. Naruto gave no visible reaction to the news, earning a soft sigh from the tailed beast. While the boy may have acted stoic to the news, Kurama knew that the information was affecting his container. If there was one thing that could get a reaction out of Naruto, it was anything that affected his precious people. The giant beast rose its paw into the air and gave the boy a reassuring pat on his head. He then stood to his full height and walked out of the clearing, leaving the Naruto alone to himself and his thoughts. What is going on, and how is Kaneko-chan involved? Rias Gremory tapped her fingers in a rhythmic pattern against one of the many hardwood desks located within Kuo Academy. Though, if one was to be honest, this wasn't just any normal, old desk. The thing that made this desk special was the fact that it was located in the student council room. The student council was made up of an illustrious group of students located within the education system of Kuo Academy. The head and leader of this council were no other than Sona Citri, heiress to the Citri clan and the very same person that the red-haired girl was waiting for. It's very unusual that Sona-chan would be late. Especially for one of our meetings. Rias thought to herself as her fingers continued to tap against the desk. Not even a minute after the thought, the door to the council room creaked open, revealing a somewhat flustered Sona Citri. The black-haired girl took a second to remove any out-of-place hair and dust off her uniform before walking over to her desk. I am sorry for the delay, Gremory-san, but I have recently acquired a rather stubborn pawn that has been giving me a lot of trouble. I had to deal with him before I could make my way to this meeting. The girl stated while taking a seat at her desk. Rias nodded as a bright flash of light covered the desk the girls were sitting at. The light soon disappeared to reveal an intricate chessboard now sat upon the table. It's not a problem. I recently managed to get a new pawn myself, and he is a bit of a handful. Rias said as she began the first move of the game. Her having the first move in their games was unspoken tradition that was in place ever since Sona had soundly beat Rias in their first game. Yes, I heard, or rather I sensed it. Issei Hayadu, one of the members of the perverted trio but also a suspected sacred gear owner. A rather interesting pick, even for you and your diverse peerage. Sona stated as she quickly moved her own piece. The Citri heir would be lying if she wasn't just slightly envious of the amount of unique pieces the girl sitting in front of her had acquired. While she had trained her peerage to the best of her abilities and knew that they would be able to evenly compete with Rias, she still felt slightly jealous since the boy was suspected to have a sacred gear within his possession. Though her own new addition to her peerage somewhat made up for that fact. Yes, he is quite the handful, honestly. His status as a perverted individual wasn't exactly well received by some of my peerage members. He is still very rough around the edges, but we're working the kinks out. Sona hummed at the response as she once again analyzed the board. Rias and she had been playing against each other in the game of strategy for years at this point. Ever since the two had met each other as children, a natural rivalry had formed between them. Their position in the Devil Society, the power their siblings had and the natural ego they each contained made for the perfect formula for a rivalry. Unfortunately, when they were younger, neither had a full peerage, so they were forced to compete against each other games of chess. That tradition had carried on throughout the entirety of their childhoods and continued to this day. Usually Sona would find herself on the winning end of most of their matches. She was the more intelligent of the two, and as a child, there was almost no competition between them. Though as time went on, Rias adapted and began to use unorthodox strategies that would catch the Citri heiress off guard. Their matches had become more even as time passed, but usually Sona would still come out as victorious most of the time. I sensed your brother in town a few days ago. Is everything okay? At this, Rias froze before releasing a sigh. Sona raised a single eyebrow at this. She knew that the red-haired girl's brother could be rather eccentric. The same thing could be said about her sister, but the girl never reacted like that when she asked about Sir's in the past. Yes, I needed to meet with him for a personal matter. Kaneko recently found herself a boyfriend and I was rather suspicious of the man. He is around our age and doesn't even attend school. I was attempting to find out more information on him by using my brother, but that plan failed horribly. The red-haired girl stated as she slumped down in her seat. Sona blinked owlishly at the information, not exactly comprehending what she had just heard. Kaneko? As in your peerage member, Kaneko? Rias nodded her head solemnly, shocking Sona even more. I know. I was shocked too. And now she is mad at me for prying into the relationship. I just want to make sure that she is okay. Rias sighed out once again. Sona stared at her fellow heiress for several seconds before snapping her fingers. The chessboard in front of them disappeared in a bright flash of light, leaving the table clear and the red-haired heiress confused. Sona stood up from her chair and began to walk towards the door. Wait! Where are you going? We haven't finished our match yet. Sona stopped right at the entrance of the door, her body seemingly freezing up at the sound of her friend's voice. Very slowly, the Citri heiress turned towards her fellow heiress and looked the red-haired girl in the eyes. I am the president of the student council. My job is to uphold the reputation and mood of the school to the best of my abilities using whatever resources I have at my disposal. Kaneko-san is seen as the mascot of this school. This emotional integrity of this school cannot withstand the fallout of an upset Kaneko. I refuse to let this school fall because of that. The girl said with an unusual amount of passion held within her voice. Rias blinked at the girl's rather unusual behavior as the Citri made a sharp turn back towards the door and charged out of the office. Well, that was unexpected. Kaneko shivered once again as she slowly made her way through the streets of Kuo. The entire day, she had chills running up and down her spine. A constant sense of foreboding hung over her head during school. It took all of her mental strength not to attack the closest person next to her whenever the foreboding feeling reached an apex. Her instincts as a Nekashu and as a reincarnated devil constantly screamed at her that something bad was going to happen. It had even gotten to a point where she had even reached out to her fellow peerage members to see if they felt the same. She made sure to avoid Rias and Aquino as she was still rather upset with them because of their actions. A shiver traveled up the young girl's spine once again, breaking her focus and almost making her stumble. That had been the strongest one she had felt so far today. She could literally feel the hair on the back of her neck raising as she continued her journey. What is going on? Kaneko thought to herself as she continued to make her way towards her boyfriend's shop. The walk only took a short 5 minutes, but during those 5 minutes, she was bombarded with shivers and a sense of foreboding that grew stronger with each step. After what seemed like an eternity, she got to the entrance of Naruto's shop and was rather shocked to see that the place was completely empty. She saw that the sign said open, so she shrugged her shoulders and went in. Immediately, the chills running through her body stopped and the foreboding feeling faded away. A small smile popped up on her face as she walked to the back room. She hopped over the counter separating the back of the shop from the front of the shop and walked to the back room. Naruto-kun, are you back here? The girl asked as she opened the door to the room. She immediately noticed that the room was dimly lit with only a single bulb in the corner, providing the room with only the tiniest amount of light. The second thing she noticed was her boyfriend. The boy was sitting directly in the center of the room on a stool. His face was overshadowed by his blonde locks as he slowly and methodically cleaned a small, glass cup. Naruto. Kaneko called out the boy's name due to his lack of notice to her presence. The boy's head slowly raised up, revealing his bright, clear blue eyes to the girl. A soft smile adorned his face as he continued to run his rag over the small glass. Hey Ko-chan. Why don't you sit next to me? Kaneko's eyes immediately locked onto the stool directly next to the teen. How she didn't notice it when she first entered the room, she didn't know. But she had no reason to refuse him as she slowly walked over and plopped her butt on the stool. "Why aren't there any customers in the store?" Kaneko said as she stared out into the empty store. Naruto remained silent next to her for several seconds before letting out a small sigh. Kaneko's head turned and she watched as the blonde-haired boy slowly set the glass down and turned to her. The girl almost recoiled by the steely look the boy's eyes had suddenly taken on. She had never seen this look in his eyes before. "Kaneko-chan, I know we haven't been together for long, but I want to ask you something." Kaneko's heart completely skipped a beat when she heard this. Millions of possibilities immediately began to flash through her head as her boyfriend continued to stare at her. Was he going to ask her to take their relationship to another level? Was he going to ask her to marry him? Was he going to ask her about Rias and Akino? "Kaneko, are you a human?" At this, Kaneko froze. Her body, mind and heart just seemed to stop moving. Of the millions of possibilities that crossed her mind only seconds ago, this had not been one of them. "I guess I should explain some things first. I know that you have chakra." Once again, Kaneko's heart was forced to skip a beat at the sudden revelation. "I've been able to sense it from you since the day we met, but I was unsure on whether you knew about it up until recently." Kaneko had to hold in a growl as her mind immediately went to the king of her peerage. Her interference in her relationship had forced this to happen. "I was unsure until that girl Rias showed up. I sensed an energy coming from her. Though hers was not chakra, it was much darker. Then a red-headed man came into my shop carrying the same energy. That set off even more alarms in my head. But the final straw happened a few nights ago. I watched as your friend, she raised a boy from the dead. I could sense the same energy flowing through her now in that boy. And when I took a deeper look into your energy, I saw you had the same energy. I can feel it intertwining with your chakra. So, all of that leads me to my question. Are you a human? Or have died before?" Naruto asked once again. By this point in the conversation, Kaneko's mind had started to work once again. It was racing as it attempted to process everything she had just heard. A part of her was furious with her king when she realized that she had somehow gotten her brother involved if the statement about the red-headed man was anything to go by. A part of her was terrified that everything she had tried so hard to hide from the boy had somehow been revealed to him within a week of meeting Rias and Akino. But finally, the last part of her was very curious of how the boy beside her was able to sense all of this. And that part of her was the first to speak. How? How are you able to sense all of this?" The girl managed to stutter out. Naruto let out a long sigh before standing from his stool. Kaneko watched as the boy stripped himself of his apron before stretching out his arms. The boy closed his eyes and took in a very deep breath. Kaneko's eyes widened when she felt a massive amount of chakra wash over her. She didn't notice her nekashu features come out as the warm chakra poured over her entire body. It felt so warm and comforting. It surrounded her entire body and filled her up completely. "I've been keeping some secrets from you as well, Kaneko-chan. And I can't exactly expect you to be honest with me if I'm not being completely honest with you. I'm not from this world. I am from a world of chakra using ninjas. I am a sage, a master of senjutsu, I am a ninja and I have several demons sealed inside my stomach." Naruto blurted out. His eyes glanced down to his girlfriend in order to judge her reaction. He knew it was somewhat of a risk to just throw everything at the girl all at once. He was very shocked to see the white cat ears sitting on her head and the white cat tail laying limply behind her. He had known his girlfriend was special, but he never expected anything to this extent. "Senjutsu?" The girl stuttered out while slowly standing from the stool. Naruto slowly nodded his head before closing his eyes once again. Kaneko's heart almost leapt out of her mouth when she felt the familiar feeling of nature surround the boy. She could literally feel the hate of the world slowly filling the boy. "No!" Kaneko screamed before pouncing on the boy. Naruto was knocked out of his meditative state when the full weight and strength of the reincarnated, devil girl with the power of a rook slammed into his chest. He was lifted off his feet and slammed full force into the nearby wall. The concrete wall cracked as it absorbed the full force of the teen's body being propelled by Kaneko's strength. Kaneko, on the other hand, was now straddling her boyfriend's hips while her hands laid on his chest. She had immediately dashed over to him when she realized what she had done. Her breathing was heavy as she stared down at the slightly shocked boy. She didn't mean to use her full strength to tackle the boy. But when she had started to sense the nature chakra flowing into the boy, she had no idea how to react. Her instincts had taken over and her body had just moved on its own. I am sorry, Naruto-kun. I didn't mean to hit you that hard. Kaneko slowly trailed off when she noticed that her boyfriend was now chuckling beneath her. His chuckles turned into a full-blown laughter that sent the girl spiraling in confusion. Her confusion was soon erased when she felt the boy's hand softly brush against one of her ears. The stiffness in her body immediately melted away and her body became lax at her boyfriend's touch. Naruto continued to slowly stroke the girl's ears and head as she melted more into his embrace. You don't have to apologize at all, Ko-chan. I deserved it for keeping all of that from you. Though it looks like you've been keeping some stuff from me as well. Naruto said. He couldn't even tell if the girl was listening to him anymore as his fingers assaulted every single pleasurable area on her head. She had even started purring a couple of seconds ago, adding even more cuteness to the situation. Kaneko was currently experiencing one of the most pleasurable moments of her life. All thoughts of the previous conversation had went straight out the window as the blonde-haired boy's hand continued to assault her head. She almost let out a hiss when his hand left her head but was quickly silenced when she felt the boy's lips press up against hers. His hand immediately found her head once again and she was forced to moan into the kiss as the combination overloaded her sense of pleasure. She slowly began to grind her hips against her boyfriend's as the kiss grew deeper and deeper. Her own hands began to wander the sculpted body of the man beneath her. She was pleasantly surprised when she felt a slowly growing lump begin to press against her rear end. She could feel what she could only guess to be her boyfriend's erection slowly press up against her ass. Just the feeling of it made the girl shiver with pleasure as the kiss continued on. And what is going on here? A voice cut through the entire mood of the situation, making Naruto and Kaneko freeze. Naruto had no idea who the voice belonged to and ended up just being stunned by the sudden intrusion. Kaneko, on the other hand, recognized the strict and stern voice and immediately grew angry at the sound of it. Her hands balled up into fist as her anger quickly filled her body. Well, Kaneko-san, would you like to explain yourself? You know this behavior is rather unfit for a freshman of Kuo Academy. Kaneko's head slowly turned and her eyes met with Sona Citrus. The president of the student council was standing in the door of the back room with her hands folded behind her back. Rias Gremory stood behind the girl with a shocked but slightly worried expression on her face as she observed the situation. Kaneko-san, I think it's best that you get up so we can leave. Kaneko didn't even allow the girl to finish as she leapt up off her boyfriend and pounced at the girl, her fist balled up in preparation of hitting the student body president. Sona, not expecting that type of reaction from the girl, could only stand in shock as the Nekasha grew closer and closer. Rias attempted to throw up a barrier spell but it was obvious that she wasn't going to make it. Luckily for everyone in the room, Naruto's senses when it came to negative emotions were very acute. He had sensed the buildup of anger in Kaneko and had acted appropriately. Just as she leapt off of his body, he had moved as well. His top speed far surpassed the girl and he managed to slip past her flying form. He placed himself in front of the girl and managed to catch her just before she managed to tear out the throat of the Citriere. I think it's best if you two leave, Naruto said as he wrapped his arms around his rampaging girlfriend. Sona continued to stare in shock as she looked into the eyes of the pissed-off Nekasha. She was snapped out of her stupor when she felt Rias's hand land on her shoulder. She turned her head back towards the redhead and saw her shaking her head. Sona turned back towards the odd couple and saw that the girl had yet to calm down. The heiress coughed into her palm and straightened her back in an attempt to regain some sense of the dignity she had walked in with. We will be discussing this later, Kaneko-san, Sona said in a clipped tone before quickly exiting the room with Rias in tow. The two heiresses scurried out of the store with Kaneko's hissing following them all the way out. We messed up. We really messed up this time. Chapter 4. Kaneko couldn't help but release an angry hiss at the retreating form of the pair of heiresses. The anger that she was feeling far surpassed anything she had felt before. Even the feeling of Naruto's arms wrapped around her couldn't quell the negative emotions that had built up inside of her. Naruto released a sigh as he continued to embrace his agitated girlfriend. The emotions that were quite literally pouring out from the girl were very noticeable to the sage, even without his empathetic abilities. Kaneko had already made it known that Rias' initial curiosity in their relationship had irritated her. When this new girl had come charging into his shop and started to order her around, he instantly knew that it was going to set off the Nico girl. He had felt the build-up of emotions in his girlfriend with each word that came out of the black-haired girl's mouth. Naruto's attention was snapped back to the girl when he heard her hiss once again. It seemed she wasn't going to calm down by herself anytime soon. A small smirk made its way onto his face when he realized he would have to calm her down himself. Lemon. Kaneko released yet another hiss as her nose was assaulted with Rias and Sona's stench. The two devils' scent lingered in the air, which only served to irritate her. She couldn't even sniff without getting a nose full of their smell, a fact that almost set her off the edge. Not even her boyfriend's embrace was enough to calm her down at the moment. Her king had once again invaded her privacy and this time had even brought in Sona to help her do so. And she had the audacity to do it when she was spending time with her mate? She was not just going to lie down and take that. In her mind, her attacking of Sona was 100% justified and nothing would change that. Kaneko growled to herself, completely unaware of her boyfriend's train of thought or the expression on his face. She was so wrapped up in her own anger that she didn't even realize that one of Naruto's hands had once again made its way to her head until it was too late. A sharp gasp unexpectedly escaped her lips when she felt his calloused hand gently caress her Nekashu ear. What are you doing? Kaneko managed to stutter out as Naruto gently stroked her head. Just be quiet and relax. Naruto said as his hand continued to stroke the girl's ears. He felt her shiver in his embrace, causing his smirk to evolve into a full-blown grin. Honestly, the blonde was rather inexperienced when it came sex. He was a virgin with his only experience when it came to the act was, unfortunately, having to listen to Jiraiya have it when the man would somehow manage to rope some poor woman into having it with him. Those nights were probably the only ones he wished he could have not spent with the man. He also had read the books his perverted sensei had created. At the moment, he was planning to follow the general lines that the book had set up for him. Still, he was completely ignorant and inexperienced when it came to girls with cat appendages. However, he did know that cats usually enjoyed it when you gently stroked their ears and their tails. It seemed like the same thing applied to Kaneko. Kaneko released another gasp when she felt Naruto's other hand gently wrap around the base of her tail. Her arms found their way wrapped around the boy's midsection as his hand slowly slid along the length of her tail. She could sense a small wetness forming near her crotch as Naruto's petting sent waves of pleasure rushing through her body. The gentle caressing of her cat appendages was driving her crazy. I edited out the lemon. Sorry. Naruto-kun. Kaneko managed to mumble out through the haze of pleasure that had overtaken her. Her boyfriend's attention was now directed towards the young girl's face. Naruto immediately noticed the heavy blush that had settled on her face. Her breathing seemed labored as her eyes became half-lidded. It was very obvious to him what the girl was currently feeling. Naruto flopped down alongside the girl as he attempted to catch his breath. The couple remained silent for several minutes, simply basking in the glow of losing their virginities to each other. You never answered my question. Naruto was the one who broke the silence between the two. Kaneko turned her head and saw the boy was staring at her with a small smile on his face. A brief moment of conflict ripped through her brain, but the reassurance of the boy's smile quickly squashed that feeling. As you have probably guessed by my extra features. Naruto's hand moved to the girl's ears and gently began to stroke them, earning him an appreciative purr from the girl. I'm not a human. I'm something known as a nekashu, a special type of cat-like yukai. But more importantly, I am a devil. And with this, Kaneko forced her demonic wings from out of her back, ripping 2 holes into the back of her school shirt. Naruto felt an immediate spike in the tainted energy coming from the girl as soon as she revealed her wings. His eyes were focused on the leathery skin that covered the demonic, bat wings. He felt his hand slowly leave the girl's ears and reached over to her wings. His hands grazed over the appendages, an action that he noticed elicited a shiver from his girlfriend. A devil. I certainly wasn't expecting that. Naruto said while observing the girl's wings. Kaneko looked at the boy out the corner of her eyes, watching him for any negative reaction to the revelation. On the outside she had put on her usual stoic face, but on the inside she was extremely nervous. This wasn't just a tiny childhood secret that couples would share with each other and laugh about. This was a life and relationship-altering secret that, depending on his reaction, could ruin everything that had been built between them. A hard lump formed in her throat as more and more bad thoughts swirled through her head as the seconds continued to pass. I can sense your emotions, Ko-chan. There's no need to worry, this won't change anything between us. The negative emotions were literally pouring off the girl's skin, but Naruto didn't need his empathetic abilities to know how the girl was feeling. Though he was surprised by the sudden revelation, he had already mentally prepared himself for something outlandish like this. After all, he did come from a world full of ninjas, demons, shark men, demonic princesses with unlimited power, and even a plant man. A devil as a girlfriend was nothing compared to what he had been through. Now, as I was saying before, I suddenly got launched into the wall. Kaneko had the decency to blush when Naruto directed his stare at her. I am not from this world, I am actually not even sure I'm from this dimension. Naruto went on to explain his past, his true one and not the censored version he had been feeding Kaneko over the course of their relationship. He explained his early career as a ninja and his struggles during it. He told the story of his adventures in Wave and his encounters with Zabuza and Haku. He went over his adventures in the land of snow, tea, sand, and so many others. He left out some parts which included the Pain's assault and the complete massacre of Konoha, some of the events in the Fourth Shinobi War and Kagaya almost enslaving the entirety of the shinobi forces around the world. Other than that, he went into full detail about his journeys and his life. If I didn't know you, I would assume you're crazy and walk away from you. But the fact that I can now sense an enormous amount of chakra flowing through you proves your claims. Plus the fact that you know how to use senjutsu. Naruto frowned at the girl's reluctance to even say senjutsu, but he decided to drop the matter as there were more pressing things to talk about. I guess it's my turn now. Kaneko started out before explaining a bit of her own history. She went over the history of Nekashu and their sudden extinction. She talked about her sister but purposefully left out any mention senjutsu. The topic was still very sensitive to her, and the fact that her boyfriend apparently was adept in using it did not change her opinion about the technique. She explained how she came to be under the ownership of Rias Gremory due to her sister's actions and through the use of the peerage system. She had to quickly explain the Gremory family's treatment of their peerage member when Naruto had learned that Rias basically owned her. She could tell that fact still bothered the boy, but at least he was no longer liable to go out and slit Rias' throat in her sleep because of it. I guess my nickname fits you a lot more than I originally thought, Nico-chan. Naruto said as the girl finished up her monologue. Kaneko turned her head away from the boy in order to hide the embarrassed blush that had appeared on her cheek. Her attempts at hiding it didn't last long when she felt Naruto's arms wrap around her stomach and her but suddenly leave the ground. Not even a second later, she found herself sitting in her boyfriend's lap with him petting her ears. She immediately melted into the embrace, enjoying the light petting the boy was providing her with. Now that I know about all of this, I think it would be best if I had a conversation with your friends. I need to clear things up with them about our relationship, and have a small chat with this Rias girl. Kaneko turned her head towards the boy and gave him a mock glare and a small slap on the chest. Don't give me that look, I'm not going to go in and threaten her. I just want to have a little talk with the girl that claims to own my girlfriend. Kaneko had a feeling that this little talk he was talking about would turn out to be a lot more than little. Look, I'll wait for your school's entrance tomorrow, and when you get out, you can lead me to the club. Everything will be fine. Naruto said with a large grin on his face. Kaneko had a very bad feeling about this. Sona sighed to herself as she looked through yet another group of complaints from the student body. Her job as the president of the student council didn't just consist of looking imposing and berating students in the hallways. She also had to deal with a constant stream of paperwork from students, teachers, clubs, even the janitors. Most of these consisted of complaints, but some actually dealt with requests, like the one she was holding in her. It was a formal request by the swim team to be allowed to use lethal force on the perverted trio if they were caught attempting to peep on them again. Sona stared at the paper for several long seconds, debating on actually signing off on it. Unfortunately, she knew that dealing with the consequences of their death would be a lot worse than their current actions. So with a heavy heart and a sigh, she wrote "declined" on the paper. Sona's head rose when she heard the knob to her door twist. Not even a second later, the oak door swung open and in came stepping in a very beautiful young girl. The girl had long straight black hair that extended all the way down to her knees with split bangs and heterochromic eyes, with a violet left eye and a light brown right eye. In addition to wearing the Kuo Academy girls' school uniform, she also wore blue, semi-rimmed glasses with square lenses. Tsubaki-chan, it's very nice to see you. Sona greeted her queen piece, who so happened to be one of her closest friend. The young girl smiled and nodded to her king while walking over towards her desk. It's nice to see you too, Sona-sama, but unfortunately I have some news to report. Sona immediately stiffened up at the sound of her queen's voice. It was very rare that the school had to deal with any problems, excluding the perverted trio. For Tsubaki to actually feel the need to report it straight to her, enough people must have complained about it around campus, or it had to do with her duties as a devil. There have been several complaints about a suspicious figure hanging around the entrance of the campus. He's been described as a blonde-haired delinquent with whisker tattoos. Usually I would just leave issues like this alone, but the teachers claim it's been a distraction to their classes, especially for the female population, and asked for us to deal with it appropriately. Tsubaki stated while pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Sona's eyebrows rose up at the whisker comment as a figure popped up in her head. Could he had possibly tracked her down to school in order to exact revenge? Was he planning something nefarious against the school? She needed to find out. Come with me, Tsubaki. We'll confront this delinquent together. It probably would have been smart if you actually asked her when she got out of school. Naruto huffed as Kurama's voice ranged through his head. The boy glanced at his wrist to look at his non-existent watch, causing him to sigh. He really needed to get one of those. It's not my fault. I was still a little shocked at the fact that my girlfriend was a devil who apparently is basically enslaved to another teenage girl. It's not something you learn about every night. Naruto uttered back sarcastically at the tailed beast. The giant fox let out a deep chuckle before going silent, signaling that it had dropped the issue with the boy. Stupid foxes and their smartass remarks. And stupid school, I'm not even in it and it's annoying me. Naruto huffed out while crossing his arms. The blonde-haired boy stood directly outside the school's entrance. He was leaning against the brick wall that surrounded the entirety of the campus. The sun was high in the sky and didn't look to be setting anytime soon. Can I ask why you are leaning against my campus walls? Naruto's head shot up at the sudden sound of a voice. He was surprised to see the same black-haired girl who had attempted to berate Kaneko standing in front of him. The girl was wearing the same school outfit and had the same stoic face that she had entered his shop with. Standing beside her, however, was a new girl. The best way to describe her was a tall, black-haired beauty in a schoolgirl's outfit with glasses. I'm waiting for someone. Do you girls happen to know when the school day ends? Naruto asked the girl, ignoring the glare the tall one was sending him. Sona continued to stare at the blonde-haired boy, her thoughts masked from Naruto. The boy in front of her was obviously not normal, or at least not stupid, considering the fact that he had been present when Kaneko had her ears and tail out. Just how much did he actually know about the girl or the supernatural world was the real question she wanted answered. That information is none of your business. You're free to wait for that person outside the boundaries of the campus. Sona spoke as she looked Naruto in the eye. The two had a small stare-off for several long seconds before Naruto finally relented. The boy released a loud sigh before pushing himself off the wall and turning his back to the girls. He took several steps away from the girls and it looked like he was about to leave before he suddenly stopped in his tracks. I'm sorry girls, but I can't make it that easy for you. And with that, Naruto brought himself down into a crouch before sending himself flying through the air into a backflip. Tsubaki and Sona watched in shock as the blonde-haired boy flew over their heads before landing several feet behind them in a crouch. The teen slowly stood to his full height, dusted off his clothing with his hands before flashing a smile to the girls. I think I'll just explore the campus while I'm waiting. Catch me if you can. And with that, Naruto went dashing off towards the school, leaving Sona and Tsubaki standing in shock. Gather the rest of the peerage and catch that boy before the end of the school day. I will not let that delinquent run wild on campus. Sona uncharacteristically yelled at Tsubaki. The girl hesitated for a moment before shooting her king a small nod and disappearing on the spot. Kaneko sighed to herself as her eyes glanced up to the clock once again. The two tiny arms inside the machine didn't seem to have moved since the last time she checked it. Her eyes glanced back to the teacher who was drawling on about some basic math. Her attention was stolen away from the teacher when she heard a very faint knocking. Her head turned, along with several students near her, to the window located near her desk. They saw absolutely nothing but the campus grounds, making them believe they had just imagined it. Their attention was brought back to the teacher after a couple of seconds of searching, albeit with a lot of reluctance. Several minutes passed before another knock, this one much quieter, caught Kaneko's attention. She glanced to the window once again and was surprised to see her boyfriend smiling at her from outside the window. The boy waved at her before pointing to the door of the classroom. Kaneko rolled her eyes at the boy before shooting the clock a quick glance. She still had a full 30 minutes before the class ended and she honestly didn't think she was going to last that long. She nodded at the boy before turning her attention back into the classroom, raising her hand and asking the teacher to be excused to use the bathroom. The man relented to her request and Kaneko dashed out of the room, her books and bag in hand. Kaneko didn't even manage to take a step out the school building before she was snatched into the arms of her boyfriend. A smile slowly made its way onto her face as she was lifted off her feet and into the arms of the person she loved. "Hey there, Ko-chan. Sorry, but I couldn't really wait any longer, especially knowing that you were within petting distance." Kaneko nodded as the boy placed her bag on his back and let the girl back down onto her feet. "Did you bring in?" Kaneko was interrupted when Naruto placed a large lollipop in her mouth. The girl blinked at the sudden taste of the treat but immediately began to lick and gnaw on it. Naruto let out a chuckle as he watched the girl attack the sucker with her mouth. "So from what I've learned in my brief time here, we have about 30 minutes until your school ends. What do you want to do?" Kaneko took several seconds to enjoy the treat given to her by the blonde-haired teen before removing it from her mouth with a small pop and responding. "Rias-sama actually has final period free and should be in the clubroom right now. We could go there and get this over it," Kaneko said before placing the lollipop back in her mouth. Naruto hummed for several seconds before nodding his head and taking a step forward. He was completely unprepared for Kaneko to leap from the ground and onto his back. His arms quickly shot back and wrapped around the girl's thighs as her arms wrapped around his neck. "I will eat you." The girl's speech was muffled with the lollipop in her mouth, though Naruto was still able to understand her. Naruto rolled his eyes as his girlfriend's actions before slowly marching forward. Every couple of dozens of steps, the girl would tap his shoulder to tell him which way to turn. Eventually, after several minutes of walking, the two found themselves in front of a large building that was completely separated from any other building on the campus. The building's exterior could be described as old as parts of it looked dilapidated and overrun by plant wildlife. "Is this it?" Naruto asked, earning him an affirmative hum in response. Naruto observed the building for several seconds, looking at the several windows and side doors just in case he had to make a quick escape. With his observation finished, he stepped into the building with his girlfriend latched onto his back. It took several more minutes for them to reach the actual clubroom, and when they arrived, Naruto was surprised by the interior. The clubroom interior was a wood-paneled room with Victorian-style couches and chairs along the walls. One side of the room seemed to be equipped with baths and steam was currently pouring out from over there. "Sit while I get Rias, Naruto-kun," Kaneko muttered while hopping off his back. Naruto watched as the girl disappeared behind one of the curtains in the clubroom before he sat down on the rather comfortable couch. "This place absolutely reeks of that tainted energy. There's different variations of it strewn all across the room. The girl most likely has multiple people under her rule. Be careful, we don't know how strong these devils are," Kurama warned. Naruto nodded to himself as he continued to observe the room. Naruto's attention was brought away from the room's scent when he saw his girlfriend exit the back room of the clubhouse. The girl immediately marched over to him and plopped herself down into his lap. "She should be out soon," the girl said before going quiet. Naruto placed his hand on her head before beginning to gently stroke it. He could feel the tension in her body slowly melt away as his hands rubbed away her stress plus. The couple stayed like this for a full minute, simply enjoying being with each other with the silence in the room. "I'm sorry for keeping you two waiting." The moment was unfortunately ruined when the sound of Rias' voice cut through the silence. Naruto's eyes locked onto the redheads as she stepped from behind the curtain, fully dressed in her school outfit. Rias gave a small incline of her head to the both of them before walking over to her desk and sitting down in it. "It's quite alright. We weren't waiting for long," Naruto said with a polite smile on his face. Rias nodded and the room once again descended into silence. Neither of the two went to speak first as Naruto saw fit to simply sit on the couch and continue to stroke the girl's head. Kaneko's eyes were open and she was shooting a not-so-obvious glare at her king. "So? I was informed you wanted to speak with me," Rias said. Naruto nodded his head before looking down at Kaneko. The Nekashu met his look before giving a small pout and a huff before sliding off the boy's lap. Naruto shot her an appreciative grin before standing up from his seat and focusing his gaze on the red-headed girl. Yeah. Recently there seems to be a misunderstanding between you, Kaneko and I. I've come here to clear some of those issues. Naruto paused for several seconds to make sure the girl was still on track. Whether you believe me or not, I love Kaneko. I know we haven't been together for long, but my feelings for her are sincere. I believe her feelings for me are also sincere. And your butting into our relationship is helping no one. I am aware of your special relationship with Kaneko, and it's very sweet that you care for her so much, but you are taking things too far. Naruto finished by crossing his arms over his chest. Rias sat silently in her seat, seemingly thinking over his words before responding. I do not know you and I do not trust you. Kaneko is a very close friend of mine and I care about her well-being. I will not allow anyone to harm her physically or emotionally. With all due respect, your actions during the past few weeks have been more emotionally disturbing to Kaneko than anything I have ever done to her. With all due respect, I've spent years with Kaneko and I know her very well. If I was really bothering her that much, I would know. With all due respect, that last part is bullshit. You take that back. Rias yelled as she shot up from her seat. Make me take it back. Naruto said in a childish tone. Kaneko rolled her eyes at her boyfriend's behavior as she watched Rias step from out behind her desk. The girl's anger was on full display as she stomped her way up to Naruto. Take it back. No. Take it back. No. Take it back. Rias-sama, I'm hurt. Issei came bursting into the clubroom only to have a couch cushion come crashing into his face. Rias and Naruto's eyes turned to Kaneko and saw the girl was staring innocently at the wall while munching on one of her cookies. Look, the bottom line is that your interference in our relationship is bothering you, Kaneko and I. I'm asking for the both of us to stop it. I know that Kaneko has obligations to you due to her being a devil. Yes, I know about that, and I understand. But there's a certain boundary you need to stay behind when it comes to our relationship. Naruto stated while flaring a bit of his chakra for emphasis. Rias' eyes widened when she felt the quick burst of chakra wash over her. The burst was strong enough to send the girl tumbling backwards onto her butt. Not even several seconds later, the door to the clubhouse bursted open and in rushed Sona, Tsubaki, Akino, and a princely-looking boy. Each one of them had their devil energy flowing around them as they looked at Rias' down form. Their eyes locked onto the blonde-haired boy as they collectively narrowed their eyes at him. This may look bad, but I promise you it's all a big misunderstanding, let's just talk it out. The room was silent for several seconds before Issei suddenly charged into the room, his gauntlet out as he ran towards Naruto. Attack! With a single word, all hell broke loose. That's it for part 1. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.